Well, good morning, everyone. General Ham, General Swan, General McQuiston, thank you all very much for this invitation. It really is an honor to come back and do this. And so although I am at the Defense Logistics Agency supporting all of the services, clearly I have an affinity for the Army, hooah. And so it's great to be here this morning. I also want to recognize my old boss, General Stevenson. And sir, I will simply say that if this presentation doesn't live up to expectations and standards, it's your fault. You trained me, right? And so thank you very much. And so to all of our senior Army leadership, Mr. O'Keefe, again, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. Sergeant Major, thank you for your time in uniform and for what you continue to do for our Army. What a great representative. And so thank you to all of you for being here. I don't want to forget our industry partners out here this morning. And I want to say that specifically for Defense Logistics Agency, when we talk about partnership, there's no way that we get it done without you. And so for all of our industry representatives out there this morning, thank you for coming. So I want to thank you for one other thing, and that is putting me on before Gwen Bingham. Before Gwen Bingham, okay? And so she set such a high standard that I do not want to follow Gwen Bingham. And so thank you very much. I'd like to start this morning very quickly with a quick video that we recently completed that I believe encapsulates a lot of what DLA does. Certainly not everything, but a lot. And so if you would roll that video, we'll get started.
The Defense Logistics Agency is a complex network of people, processes, and organizations. At DLA, we focus not just on our mission or how we do it, but we also understand the why. It's all about serving the warfighter and the nation. Logistics is about managing and controlling the flow of goods, energy, and other resources. It's also about rapid response and big data. We push ourselves to meet challenges, be innovative, and think strategically. At the Defense Logistics Agency, logistics is our profession, our mission, our passion. DLA is the nation's combat logistics support agency. In 1961, the Defense Supply Agency was established to order common parts for the military services. In 1977, DSA became Defense Logistics Agency and began performing a mission that was more than just ordering parts. Headquartered at Fort Belvoir, DLA is a global enterprise postured to meet warfighter, whole-of-government, and partner and allied nations' logistics requirements around the world. For us, logistics means leveraging our worldwide network and expertise to sustain warfighter readiness and increase effectiveness to our government partners. It also means our dedicated teams located in our regional and major subordinate commands, or MSCs, work tirelessly to acquire and provide the supplies and services you need to accomplish your mission. When you think of DLA, our expertise is procurement. Think of an end-to-end supply chain provider. We achieve this by working with more than 12,000 suppliers to manage 9 supply chains, provide about 5 million items, and more than $34 billion in goods and services annually. DLA supports more than 2,300 weapons systems and nearly 100% of fuel for the military services. We offer energy solutions, manage the reutilization of military equipment, administer the storage and disposal of strategic and critical materials, offer document services, manage distribution centers worldwide, and provide logistics information products that leverage data with cutting-edge technology. DLA also supports 110 nations with $2 billion in foreign military sales. As the nation's combat logistics support agency, our #1 priority is to strengthen service readiness and lethality for our combatant commands. We exist to provide warfighters with what they need, where they need it, when they need it. Our dedication to support our nation runs deep, and our global network and expertise in supply chain management not only supports the warfighter, but we are also able to improve efficiency and increase effectiveness of our whole of government partners, especially in domestic and international operations. At DLA, we understand logistics is not just about supplies. It is about collaboration, building strong relationships, and being cost-conscious. We work hard to align our strategic plan and our efforts to enable DoD and the nation to address immediate needs and long-term challenges. Speed, robust partnerships, resilient networks, the ability to deploy at a moment's notice, global posture, cutting-edge technologies. This is logistics. This is DLA, the nation's combat logistics support agency.
All right, how many people are ready to charge through a wall? I mean, I know I am, right? And so that was the quickest way that I could think of, with the limited amount of time that we have, to describe, I think, what it is that DLA does. And so I wanted to talk very quickly about why I am here this morning. And a lot of it is encapsulated in what you see down in the bottom left-hand corner, and it's the why. And so when we created our most recent strategic plan in November, we spent a lot of time not talking about just what our mission is and what the vision is, but we asked ourselves, why is it that we do it? And so many of you have read the book by Simon Sinek, Start With Why. And I would tell you that I honestly believe that in Defense Logistics Agency, if you ask most of the employees, what they will tell you is, first of all, that it's to support the warfighter. And then when you look at the support that we provide to the whole of government, we would say that it's also to provide support to our nation. And so our why is to serve the warfighter and our nation. So why am I here this morning? So first of all, what I have come to understand about DLA after having been a major subordinate commander at DLA Land and Maritime in Columbus and now as the director for the last year, is that the reality is that when you look at all of the services, it really is a partnership now. When you talk about logistics support for our Army, DLA is providing most of the Class 1, the subsistence, the water, the fuel, most of the consumable repair parts. We assist in purchasing of the DLRs. And so the reality is you cannot separate the support that DLA provides from not just the Army, but from all of the military services. One of our mantras right now is, how do we operationalize that support? And so a lot of people tend to think of DLA as this very static supply chain organization. And of course, you saw all of the 6 major subordinate commands that we have. But we are indeed a global operation of 27,000 people, with 2,000 of those people permanently stationed around the world. And so we are in the Pacific, the Indo-Pacific region now. We are in each of the combatant commands, Central Command, elements forward in Kuwait, elements forward in Afghanistan, LNOs at Southcom, Northcom, you name it, and DLA is in fact there. The other reason that I'm here this morning is to give a shout out to our industry partners. And so I'll talk in just a minute about partnership. And as I looked at the list of industry partners that were going to be here this morning, I asked our ombudsman to do a calculation of the dollar value of our sales and business with just the partners that are in this room. And of the $35.5 billion we did last year, $1.5 billion is represented in this room. And so you are important indeed to what it is that we do. This is the only slide that I'm going to use this morning, and I'd just like to talk you around this. This is the DLA strategic plan, and then we will go to a question and answer session. And so the first element of our strategic plan always has been and always will be support to the warfighter first. And at DLA, we think about the warfighter in two different aspects. One is the services, and in this case, certainly it is our Army and the support that we provide directly to the services. I don't think a day or a week goes by that General Pegee and I, General Perna, General Daly, and all of the elements of the great Army logistics team that we're not collaborating on issues for our Army, specifically after some of those issues that I just talked about. The second element of that is, in fact, our combatant commands. I said that we're in all of the COCOMs. We actually have forward commands stationed, certainly in the Pacific. We have a DLA Pacific Command in Hawaii. There's a DLA Europe and Africa Command in Stuttgart. And then we have a DLA Central with a headquarters at Central Command in Tampa, but forward stationed as well throughout the CENTCOM AOR, and LNOs at all of the rest. And so we think of the warfighter in two different ways. One, the service, and then two, the combatant commands. Although we are all working for the same purpose, oftentimes they have different interests, and we have to service those interests in a different way, and that's why we are so postured the way that we are. The next element is the global posture. DLA right now we have a presence and the ability to reach over 100 different countries throughout the world. Now, that's not a physical presence, and that's why I call it posture. But we have the ability to get there. And so when the Ebola crisis erupted, I believe in 2011, what my other great friend Darrell Williams will tell you when he was at USARAF was that one of the first elements on the ground that helped to establish logistics operations was, in fact, Defense Logistics Agency. It's helping to establish contracts. And so although we did not have a presence there, we were able to get there pretty quickly. That posture extends not just throughout the combatant commands, but all across this great nation of ours as well. We have a presence in about 48 of the 50 states. The next one is strong partnerships, and that's one of the great reasons, one of the big reasons why I'm here this morning. Certainly, we are partnered with the entire Joint Logistics Enterprise. And so our biggest and most important partner in the Joint Logistics Enterprise is none other than United States Transportation Command. DLA procures the items, and essentially U.S. Transcom moves them for us through their very complicated network. But we can't divorce that from the relationship with the services, for example. If you look at our stocks that we collectively have for the Department of Defense, it really is a partnership between DLA and the services. And so DLA's complex network of warehouses, DLA has about $15 billion worth of stock that is DLA owned and managed. There's another $90 billion of stock that DLA manages for the services. And so it is indeed a partnership. And then the other partnership that I would mention is our partnership with industry. As you heard in the video, we work with a very, very complex network globally of about 12,000 different suppliers and another set of service providers. And that is, we believe, what gives DLA its girth, its global posture, its presence. It is that relationship with commercial industry. And so, again, I want to thank you for that partnership. I'll pause for just 1 second, and I'd ask everyone to, at some point, you don't have to do it at this very moment, but I'd like you to take a look at the DLA's industry engagement plan. And so one of the things that I wanted to improve at DLA and take to a new level was this important relationship that I spoke about. And so although we engage with industry at all of our major subordinate commands, and although we engage with industry at DLA headquarters, what I felt we really needed was a corporate strategy. And what you see there is, in fact, that corporate strategy, which also recognizes the interests as well of small business. And so what connects DLA to the warfighter? To a large degree, it is that relationship with industry. And so, again, thank you, and I think there's some information in there that you will find very, very useful. The next one is, in fact, whole of government. And so a little-known secret about DLA is that although the warfighter will always be first, the reality that one of the fastest-growing segments of our business is the whole of government sector. And so today, DLA supports more than 40 different whole of government agencies, to include FEMA, for example. And so some of the clips that you saw in that video were of support that were being provided last year during the 3 horrific hurricanes that ravaged our nations and some of the territories. DLA and its support with the Corps of Engineers, my good friend Todd Simonite, joined at the hip with FEMA, with Department of Homeland Security, and so many others. Right now, 20% of DLA sales are to the whole of government. And so for our commercial industry partners, how many would be successful not paying specific attention to 20% of your sales? And so that's the situation that we are in with the whole of government. And I think there's a possibility that some of that will grow. But rest assured, Army, Mr. O'Keefe, support to the warfighter has always and will always be first. And then last but certainly not least, the issue of always accountable. And so your mind should immediately go to a major effort within the Department of Defense now, certainly within DLA, and that is this move to audit readiness. And so DLA began that journey several years ago, but officially began seeking to achieve a clean statement of audit in FY17. The rest of the services followed this year in FY18. We think this is a good thing because we want to make sure that every dollar that we spend is spent for the right purpose, that we can account for it. It's what the services demand, it's what our customers demand, it's what the American people demand. And so always accountable, we think, is a very, very important line of effort. And so in brief, that's what DLA is all about. We have 5 lines of effort within our strategic plan. I hope that every single person in this room sees yourself somewhere in that strategic plan. I'll end with a couple of other things I'd like to bring your attention to. And if you look at the very middle of the lines of effort, you see 2 things. You see one ring around it that talks about innovation, it talks about data management, and it talks about information technology. And so those of you in the commercial sector intuitively understand how important that is to the business that you conduct. I would tell you that it is equally important to the Defense Logistics Agency. We're constantly in the business of innovation. And I'll make a small, not disclaimer, but if you look at the way those 3 things are positioned on that ring, when I first did the first rendering of this, I had technology on top, data management on the side, and innovation on the bottom. We did a red team of this with some of our junior employees, those that have been in DLA for 5 years or less, and I asked them to provide me some direct feedback, 16 of them. And they said, General, you got it exactly wrong. You got it exactly wrong. If you really want to appeal to the people of this organization, it's really about innovation. And as a result of their recommendations, we put innovation on top because it really does drive everything else that we do. The other major change that group highlighted for me was, you see the people and culture in the middle, and in DLA, I like to say the people and culture are the secret sauce of our organization. I really believe that. I believe that if you take care of your people, they will not allow the mission to fail. It served me well throughout my career in the Army, and it has served me well at DLA. But what they also told me was I had people and culture in the middle where it is now, but it was the same color as all of the other words on the chart. The warfighter first, the global posture, the always accountable. And they said, General, if you really want to talk to us, and if you really mean that we're the secret sauce of the organization, you need to make people and culture stand out. And so we changed it to the color that it is. And so I say all of that to say that from the very bottom of the organization at DLA to the very, very top, talking to me, the director, we are committed to the why, supporting the warfighter, supporting our nation through these 5 lines of effort. And I'm prepared to take your questions, I think. Thank you. All right.
Any questions for General Williams? Courtney.
No questions from you, General Proctor. You know this stuff better than I do. No questions.
Courtney McBride with Janes. As the Joint Force and certainly the Army shift toward this plan for a fight against a near-peer adversary and expect to be more dispersed and more distant from FOBs, how does that potentially change, not the mission of DLA, but the execution?
It's a great question, and I would tell you that we do spend a lot of time specifically working with the services to address just that question. And so one of the transformations I think that has happened within DLA over the last 15 or 20 years is this move from a static supply chain organization to one that is, in fact, much more agile in the way that it provides support. I think that evolution has led us to a point where we are, in fact, postured to support those much, much more dispersed formations. And so I believe that one of our greatest assets right now is, in fact, our agility. It's not, again, our ability to be everywhere, but it is our ability to get there when we need to be. The other thing that is manifested that is going to allow us to support this more dispersed formation is the fact that the solutions to challenges within DLA are increasingly global and not just national or regional. And I'll give you an example of one of those areas. And so some of you may remember a situation that we had in the Middle East that required us to shift some of the ways that we support in the Middle East. The only thing I'll say about that is the solutions to those challenges that we experienced in supporting our troops, never a break in support, solutions for that actually came out of the Pacific. And so in the past, our solutions would likely have come from the United States. They may have come from somewhere else within the region, but we have now reached a level of agility, thanks in large part to our relationship with commercial industry, that allow us to respond much more globally. And so how does that change the way that we support this force? Again, I think we are much, much more reliant on distribution. I think we're much, much more reliant on having a common operating picture with the services. We're even more deeply embedded with the services than we ever have been. We have to have real-time information. We can't just be considered a wholesale organization. We are side to side with the services, providing the services that are required on a real-time basis. I think that's the transformation. That's what allows us to do it. And I think through that relationship, we'll be able to support dispersed forces throughout the world.
General Williams, could you talk a little bit about DLA's support to allies and partners? Do you have the right authorities to be responsive, particularly in crisis?
Sir, another great question, and the simple answer to that question is yes. And so I talked through our strategic plan, and I hope that it was apparent that we are completely and totally nested to the SecDef's priorities. And so his priorities are clearly readiness and lethality. That's what DLA is all about. His next one is all about allies and partners. And we definitely play a decisive role. And so I'll just give a couple of examples. And so our very, very tight relationship with General Hooper at Defense Security Cooperation Agency and our support to the FMS program is one of the cornerstones of our support to allies and partners. Another one is all of the services or all of the COCOMs have the acquisition cross-servicing support agreements. And so in all of those regions, the support that many of the services provide to our allies and partners is through support that they are in fact receiving from the Defense Logistics Agency. There's also an educational and operational component. I'm not sure that a month goes by when allies and partners are not visiting the Defense Logistics Agency to see how we conduct logistics operations, or we've been invited to go and participate in some of their seminars and so forth. And so I think through the Acquisition Cross-Service and Support Agreement, the FMS cases, real-world support that we're providing in the area of operation, Afghanistan and Kuwait through our deployable support teams, I think we do quite a bit of support to allies and partners, sir. 110 different countries. Mm-hmm.
Any further questions? Courtney again.
General Williams, there have been some recent reports, and General Perna has talked about it as well, in terms of supply chain potential fragility, weakness, and particularly part shortages. Are there particular areas of concern for DLA, and what are you doing to address those?
Thank you very much. Of course, I mean, I think General Perna is spot on. I think that if you're in the logistics and sustainment business, and if that is not a concern of yours, then I think you're in the wrong business. And so when you ask the question, for example, of what keeps you up at night, I like to say, I sleep like a baby. I wake up every 30 minutes crying. This is one of those areas that truly is an area of concern. How do we mitigate any potential interruptions to our supply chain? And so just this morning, I think Ms. Dahlquist and I were having a conversation about cyber. And so I think we're all very, very concerned about what cyber can do to all of our information systems and how that can impact the flow of supplies and logistics. And so that is one of those areas that does, in fact, keep me up at night. And so what have we done about it? And so I think our information systems would be among my biggest concerns. But I would tell you over the past 5 years and working with DISA and many other agencies, what we've attempted to do is secure our information systems. And so about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe as many as 10 years ago, if you had asked how many independent applications DLA has, I think the answer from our J6 of our Chief of Information Operations would have told you about 1,200 different applications. Today, that number is down to about 250 or so. And by the end of this FY, we plan to have that number down to single digits, and we're still working to get lower. We also have placed all of our applications behind the defense firewall, and like everyone else in the Department of Defense, we're working aggressively to move as much of that behind the cloud as we possibly can. So that is one of the mitigators that we're attempting to undertake to lessen the impact of any potential cyber vulnerabilities to our information systems, which will ultimately impact our supply chains. The other thing that we have done is we are taking a look at our distribution network, our network of warehouses and so forth, and we're taking a look at where we have stocks positioned and where we may have, for example, too much stock positioned in one place And if one thing were to happen to that one location, we're doing our very best to reduce our vulnerabilities and single points of failure. And then the last thing I would tell you is the thing that we're doing is we are working as hard as we can with commercial industry. First of all, we're taking as many of their innovative ideas as we can possibly get. And then the second thing is through other distribution concepts like direct vendor delivery as opposed to storing everything in our warehouses, we think that we are definitely increasing our agility and decreasing the risk of interruptions to the supply chain. And so those are some of the things that we're doing, hopefully to mitigate some of those concerns. But I would be less than honest if I told you that it does not remain uppermost in my mind in terms of the things that DLA has to do for the warfighter.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, a big hand for, there he is.
Yeah.
Sir, really appreciate your commitment to the small business community as well. DLA is a strong record, I think, even in exceeding the small business goals. Can you tell us a little bit about your interest in efforts in strengthening even more participation from the small business community with DLA?
And so, first of all, thank you for the question. And one of the things I would tell you is that if you went to this, you'll see that there's actually a small business section in here. And so we are very, very proud of our relationship with small business. And so obviously all of the defense agencies as well as the departments are assigned small business goals by the Department of Defense. And so last year, our goal as assigned was 32%. And DLA met that goal last year. And for the first time in DLA's history, our small business in terms of pure dollars exceeded $10 billion, $10.8 billion. And so we're very, very proud of that. Additionally, this year, our assigned goal was 30.5%. And the difference with the program this year is there's much more of an emphasis and a commitment, I think, by the entire Department of Defense to not just meet your top line goal, but to meet all of the subcategories, the women-owned small business, hub zones, veteran-owned small business, disabled. And so you're now being held accountable for not just the top line, but each and every individual category. I'm happy to say that as of today, DLA is ahead of its targets in every single one of those categories. And so we did $10.8 billion in small business on last year. As of late last week, we're not even completely through the FY, and we're already at $8.5 billion. And our small business percentage at this point exceeds 35%. Now, that will likely come closer to the 30% by the end of the year. But I will just simply say that we're doing very, very well. Our commitment to small business and all businesses remains very, very strong. As I indicated, without our business relationships, DLA simply could not do what it does for the warfighter. And so thank you for that question. I will also add that today I am having an association luncheon. And so several of our very important business associations, I'll be having lunch with 5 of those representatives today that will talk about a cross-section of all of the businesses. And then on the 19th of September, some of you that are sitting in this room will receive an invitation to an industry forum that I'm hosting at DLA. And so I think one of the areas that we can all do better, that DLA in coordination with all of the services is in the area of forecasting. And so we're going to hold a forecasting summit this year on the 13th of July, where internally we're going to gather as much intelligence about what the demand pattern will look like for each of the services this coming year. And at our industry day on the 19th of September, we'd like to do a better job of giving industry as good a possible look at where we think the demand might be for specific programs in the coming FY. And so that's our commitment to you to try and do an even better job in that category. I'm going to stop short of promising you NIN level detail. That won't happen. But if I know, for example, in the Army that we had X number of brigade combat teams deploy this year, I know there's a certain operational tempo that goes along with support to a brigade combat team. And if I know that that is going to increase the number of rotations by 20% next year, that's a pretty good indicator to DLA that for those items associated with support for a brigade combat team, I need to, a lead time away, put additional stock on the shelf. And so we're going to do that with the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine Corps. I think we have to inject the human element into our forecasting, and you can't just rely upon what one of our previous DLA directors call information spitting out of the pachinko machine. And so we think that this enhanced relationship with the services and getting better ideas about levels of demand for the following year and passing that on to industry prior to the beginning of each FY will greatly enhance our forecasting, save a lot of money, and provide much more targeted support. And so, again, thank you for the question.
Anything more? Let's have a big hand for General Williams.
Thank you very much.